At 4:32 standard cycle aboard the command deck of the Vorelian dreadnought Schalvek, a low-priority signal flickered into existence on the long-range sweep grid Sector 9 outer band, unclaimed territory, no known travel routes, no trade, no military presence, a dead sector long deemed irrelevant by command. The technician on shift, a young analyst named Grether, noted the anomaly and flagged it for review, although standard procedure dictated to ignore any signal below threshold 5. The anomaly pulsed again, sharper, faster. It shifted coordinates within 3 seconds and looped a strange wave pattern across 3 frequencies. No known ship did that, no drone, no artifact, not even those old Terran satellites from before their atmospheric collapse. And yet here it was dancing on their screens like a ghost. The officer of the watch dismissed it as background noise, ordered Grether to archive the data and focus on relevant sectors. But Grether hesitated. He tapped into a secondary channel, ran a discrete motion trace, and froze when the numbers lit up. The object was accelerating beyond tolerance curves for known vessels. It had no transponder, no IFF, no registration, and no heat signature, yet it moved like a thing alive, weaving through asteroid debris, like it knew where the blind spots were, like it was watching them back. Grether reported it again, raised its alert level, and this time the bridge lights flickered a dull red warning pulse. Acknowledging the signal, the captain entered 30 seconds later, tall, silent, with eyes too tired for the hour and too sharp to ignore the readout. He stared at the data, then at Grether, then ordered a full system scan, which took 12 seconds, and returned nothing. The object was gone, just gone, wiped from every sweep and every feed except Grether's archive file, which should have auto-deleted, but did not, and that was when they realized the anomaly was not just unknown, it was unseen by design. The object had left a trail, not of radiation or ion wake, but of deliberate interference in their systems, a digital fingerprint looping in fragments like a pulse or a heartbeat. The tech teams rushed to decrypt it, but only got static layered over what seemed like human vocal patterns, slowed to imperceptible range, and buried in white noise. The room went quiet. The captain issued a low tone across the comm and called the high command relay. A full report was drafted but cut short when the anomaly reappeared, this time near the outer moons of Nethys Prime, over 100 light units from its previous location, and barely 5 minutes later, nothing could travel that distance, not even the core jumpers with full burn and prep time. Yet it was there again, flickering against the darkness, just out of reach, like a predator circling unseen. Command ordered a patrol cutter to engage. A standard intercept course was plotted, and the cutter launched with 3 crew and full scans running. The object responded by shifting again, a blur across the stars, and reappearing on the opposite side of the system. The cutter never got close, never locked on its systems, began to fail one by one. Lights flickered. Crew reported sudden vertigo and instrument feedback. The last words transmitted were not Vorelian, not synthetic. Then silence. The cutter vanished, not exploded, not disabled, just erased from every scan, like it had never launched at all. Only a faint residue of spatial displacement remained, and even that was decaying rapidly. The bridge fell into hushed confusion, then quiet dread, as the captain stared at the emptiness, where a ship should have been, where a signal had pulsed, where a thing not of this quadrant now lurked. And somewhere beneath the data, beneath the noise, a phrase filtered into the raw feed like a whisper from across the void, barely audible, barely readable, and translated across 3 languages before stabilizing. This was only observation. Commander Felix was not a cautious leader, nor a reckless one. He was bred from 6 generations of fleet tacticians, his record clean, and his instincts sharp enough to carve stone. When the cutter failed to return, and the object reappeared near the mining belt, he made a choice: deploy an interceptor, not a drone, not a probe, but a piloted craft designed for rapid engagement and adaptable pursuit protocols. The ship was sleek, painted in low reflective hull composite, and armed with a pulse cannon fast enough to chase down smugglers, strong enough to defend against pirates, and smart enough to learn from its target. In motion, it launched with Protocol 19 engaged weapons, cold sensors active, recording everything in real time from 3 angles. As it closed on the anomaly, it saw nothing at first, only empty space around the 3rd moon of Drellic. 3, then a shimmer, not heat, not light, just a shimmer, and a sensation reported by the pilot, Lieutenant Sava, as being watched not by optics, not by heat, but by intent like the air had eyes. As the ship passed into shadow, its lights flickered and static burst across comms, but not enough to trigger an abort signal. Sava switched to the analog fallback, her voice calm, her vitals steady. She initiated a slow arc around the anomaly vector, recalculating every second. Then she saw it, not a ship, not really, not metal or shape or standard form, but something black against black, moving with no light and no reflection. It was there for 3 frames of footage, then gone. The interceptor lights flared, red alarms screamed across its dash, warning of proximity, breach of gravitational distortion, and a spike in internal EM fields. The systems began failing, not all at once, but like a sequence was being run, like someone knew the ship better than the pilot and was peeling it apart. Lieutenant Sava attempted manual override, tried to fire her retros and break away, but the controls froze. The ship veered off its plotted course, and her voice cracked through the comm channel. Only once they knew we were coming. Her last words before silence, not impact, not scream, just silence. The interceptor blip vanished from the screen, and the long-range sensors reported only null return, void compression, and a microshock where the ship had been, like space had folded itself and sealed the hole. Immediately after, there was nothing to see, nothing to find. The only data recovered were partial frames from the final seconds, glitching images of what might have been a humanoid figure walking through the vacuum beside the ship without suit or tether or mass, one hand pressed to the hull. The recovery drones found nothing, no debris, no fuel trace, not even disrupted particles. The only anomaly was the signal Sava had broadcast moments before vanishing. The logs showed a layered waveform woven into her voice, encoded with symbols not Forellian, not standard Galactic, but Terran Old Earth language, buried under encryption, designed to mimic stellar noise. When decrypted, it read a single word: observe, followed by an Earth military timestamp that was 2 minutes ahead of Forellian Standard Time. No one spoke when the recording was played in the war room. The captain stood still. The technicians reviewed the footage over and over, and every time the same thing appeared: a human hand, 5 fingers, flesh, not armored, not cybernetic, sliding along the hull of the interceptor just before it vanished. The signal echo persisted in the system long after the event, a low hum at 53 Hz, pulsing like a mechanical heartbeat, always just beneath the threshold of notice, but constant and unchanging. The hum grew stronger when Forellian ships moved nearby, and weaker when they retreated. It was not a threat, not a weapon, not a call. It was something else, something deliberate and familiar, like the tick of a clock in a silent room, reminding those who heard it that time was passing and that something had arrived. The playback chamber was designed for clarity, designed to eliminate bias and emotion, so facts could be examined with stereo efficiency. But as the footage played on the high-grain projector and the Forellian commanders stared at the slowed images frame by frame, silence settled like fog across the room, and not even the old veteran spoke. The footage began with static, hard, jagged pulses of interference, like something was already distorting the data before the interceptor had even arrived. Then came 3 seconds of clean image, a wide shot of the interceptor from the tracking drone circling Drellic 3, and then it appeared, an object no larger than a shuttle, sleek, black, featureless at first glance, but shifting subtly, as if its surface was alive. It emerged from the dead orbit of the third moon and moved directly into the interceptor's path, not accelerating, not turning, not reacting, simply moving, like it had already calculated where the ship would be and when. Sensors from the drone picked up no energy spike, no propulsion trail, no matter displacement, yet the object moved at velocity impossible for any known tech, and even more impossible, it stopped instantly with zero drift, zero correction, and hovered dead center before the interceptor at exactly 600 units distance, a mathematically perfect position for both observation and intimidation. The next moment, the image distorted. Space around the object seemed to ripple, not a visual glitch, not an error, but an actual fold in light that caused the stars to bend. A full spectroanalysis showed that the object was manipulating local gravity on a micro level while remaining completely undetected by any grav scan, which should not be possible even with cloaking tech, even with black-class stealth. This thing was not hiding, it was rewriting the rules of presence itself. Then the hand appeared. Frame by frame, the footage showed a figure humanoid in shape reaching out from the object and making contact with the interceptor hull, not breaching it, not damaging it, simply touching it with an open palm for exactly 1.3 seconds, during which every system on the interceptor began to fail, not violently, but systematically, starting with navigation, then life support, then comms, each subsystem folding in sequence like a checklist being followed with clinical precision. When the hand withdrew, the ship was dead in space, and the pilot already gone, her vitals cut out cleanly with no spike, no trauma, the ship still whole but empty, like something had simply turned her off, the way one silences a console. The footage then showed the object backing away slowly, methodically, and then vanishing mid-frame, not moving, not blinking out, but vanishing by folding space around itself, leaving behind a trace signature that pulsed once and then matched the exact heartbeat rhythm of Lieutenant Sava from 30 seconds prior. The analysts were unable to explain the pulse, the techs could not trace the power source, and the scientists refused to assign theories to what they saw because no known energy type could fold space without leaving a burn. No biological form could function in open vacuum, with no protection, and no species, not even the rumored Terran specialists, had ever shown this level of controlled intimidation, with zero casualties and maximum psychological effect. The final 10 seconds of the playback were replayed over 30 times, and each time the same realization sank deeper into the minds of the commanders. This was not an attack. It was not an act of war or aggression or chaos. It was a message crafted with intent, designed to be seen, to be studied, and to be feared. When the playback ended, the room remained still. The lead intelligence officer spoke first, his voice quiet but resolute. He said one sentence, and nothing more. That was not a ship, that was a warning. And beneath the table where the feed lines ran into the wall, a soft pulse continued to throb, steady and low, echoing across the floor like a heartbeat waiting for a response. When the anomaly reappeared again, this time over Drenkova outpost, the situation escalated faster than anyone anticipated. The outpost was a research facility nestled within the ring system of a dying planet, a place where trade routes passed through but never lingered. The crew was small, just under 50 personnel, mostly civilians, and a few military escorts. Their primary task was to monitor gravitational anomalies and provide support to long-range probes. So when the first distress signal came through, there was little panic, only confusion. The signal was brief. It mentioned nothing of enemy ships, nothing of alarms, just a mention of strange readings and a flicker in the sky. No one had thought to check the deep scan grid. No one had thought to double-check the perimeter before the unexpected happened. The Vorelian fleet had learned from the first incident on Drellic 3, but nothing could prepare them for what came next. At 6:12 local time, the object arrived in full view of the outpost's surface station. Again, it seemed to appear from nowhere, first a shimmer, then a presence both visible and invisible. At once it blocked the stars for just a moment before vanishing like smoke twisting through the air. And the station crew watched as the sky bent in the most unnatural way. Gravity collapsed on itself, a ripple stretching across the moon's surface. Then there was a voice, low enough to be heard by the ears only, no transmission, no frequency, just a voice deep within the minds of those who heard it. It whispered nothing intelligible at first, but left behind the same haunting echo of something ancient. Commander Tanak, who had been stationed there for 4 cycles, was the first to react. His orders were simple: keep the outpost safe from any potential threat, but nothing in his training had prepared him for what appeared above them. So he did the only thing he could think of. He ordered the launch of the station's planetary defense drone. But this was a protocol built for conventional threats, designed to intercept meteorites or rogue space debris. But not this. The drone was released with the usual clunky hesitation of a machine struggling to reach its target. It circled the station at a safe distance, waiting for the right moment to strike. But it did not make it 10 clicks from the station's edge before its systems froze, and the drone shut down completely. Tanak swore under his breath and ordered a second launch, this time faster, this time more aggressive. But before the second drone could even reach the system's outer atmosphere, it did something far worse. The object split the sky open with a ripple of space, and then reached out a single tendril of energy that wrapped itself around the drone like a hand around an insect. The drone didn't explode, it didn't burn out, it didn't crash, it simply stopped functioning. It hovered motionless in the air. And the voice spoke again in that strange mental frequency echoing through the minds of the crew this time. The words were clear, and they were directed at Tanak's mind. And the message was simple: leave or suffer. The voice felt as if it tore through every inch of his mind, his thoughts scattering to the edges of his consciousness. He stood frozen, his mouth dry, his eyes locked on the object as it remained still for a moment. But then, as quickly as it appeared, it began to recede, pulling back slowly, so deliberately, it almost felt like an invitation to follow. But Tanak didn't move, and he didn't have to give the order because his crew followed his hesitation with their own. No one attempted to engage, no one even bothered to try again to raise a weapon. The fear had already taken hold. The station went dark. No one tried to make a call to fleet, no one even dared to send a distress signal. They simply waited in the silence that followed. Back at the command center, the Forelian commanders had already noted the anomaly's arrival near Drenkova outpost and began calculating options. None of them included direct intervention. But as the timeline unfolded and the message was decrypted, a sinking feeling washed over the room, the same realization that came during the playback of the interceptor's final moments. It wasn't an attack, it wasn't a threat, it wasn't even a warning. It was a test. It was always a test. The object was studying them, learning them like a predator learning the taste of its prey. The Forelian fleet was not one that easily buckled under pressure. Their history was filled with victory after victory on distant worlds, their technological superiority unmatched by most. But now they found themselves crippled, not by firepower, not by strategy, but by the sudden realization that they were no longer the apex species in the galaxy. And interrogation was called not to gather information from their enemies, but to understand how they had become so utterly unprepared for this first contact. The council convened, and the officers stood before the chambers, the room cold and sterile. No windows, no distractions, only the dim hum of the central array, and the long lines of data that filled every inch of the screens in front of them. Their faces impassive, their eyes weary. They were used to commanding armies, used to dealing with dissenters and traitors, but this was different. The voice spoke again, this time clearer than before, a low rumble that echoed through the chamber, like it had always been there waiting for them. But this time there was no mistaking it, no error in translation, no distortion. It was human, the voice was human, and it was addressing them in their own language. The message was simple and chilling, a direct transmission broadcast through their command relay systems across the fleet. We are the Terran Vanguard, and we are watching you. The council members glanced at each other, their expressions unreadable, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The human voice continued with the same calm yet undeniable tone, the message not a threat, but a statement. We have seen your fleets, we have studied your tactics and your weaknesses, and we know your history. We know that you will react out of fear. We know that you will overestimate our strength and underestimate our resolve. You will make a mistake, and when you do, we will be there. At first there was no response. The officers and commanders looked to each other, unsure of how to react. It had been decades since the Forelians had encountered a species capable of speaking to them directly with such authority and confidence. Yet this was different. It wasn't an attack or a show of force. It was a challenge they couldn't ignore. The intelligence officers began pulling data from their archives, trying to find any clue that could explain this sudden appearance of the Terran species. They found nothing on their records, no evidence that humans were capable of this level of technological advancement. They found nothing in the Galactic archives, no record of a Terran fleet, or anything resembling the ships they had encountered. It was as if the humans had simply appeared out of nowhere. The council's leading strategist, a veteran of countless battles, stood and spoke, his voice low but commanding. We are dealing with something more than a scout. This is no ordinary species. This is something designed for war, something designed to provoke fear, to break through our defenses and turn our strength against us. They are not here to negotiate. They are not here for diplomacy. They are here to dominate. The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. They were not prepared for this kind of engagement. They had studied every species they had encountered, every civilization they had conquered, but this was something new, something terrifyingly efficient. The voice from the Terran vanguard continued the message, now less formal, but no less threatening. If you think we have come to your borders to fight, we haven't. We have come to watch, we have come to learn. We have come to make sure you never forget that we are here, and that we will be watching every move you make. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. None of them had ever encountered a species that could communicate like this, that could strike fear into their hearts without even lifting a weapon. They realized that they were dealing with something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. The interrogation ended without answers, only more questions. What were the humans after? What did they want? And why had they chosen to reveal themselves in such a manner? Why had they chosen to show only a fraction of their power and leave the Vorelians trembling in uncertainty? As the council session ended and the chambers emptied, the officers knew one thing for certain: the Vorelian fleet was no longer the apex power in this galaxy. They were now the hunted, and the humans were the predators. The Vorelian fleet moved in silence for days, each ship maintaining a wide orbit around their home systems, each commander staring into the void, unable to ignore the weight of the revelation that had been delivered to them. The Terran vanguard was not a fluke. It was a presence, an organized force that had been watching them for longer than anyone could have anticipated. Reports continued to flood in from every corner of the galaxy. Every anomaly, every strange occurrence now seemed connected to the humans, but no one could explain how they had eluded detection for so long, how they had operated in plain sight, yet remained invisible to every sensor, every probe, and every scan. High Command convened again, the room dark and heavy with the weight of their decisions. The council gathered in silence, staring at the central projector as the data streams continued to filter in from every corner of their fleet. The latest transmission was not another message from the humans, but something far worse, a discovery buried deep within their own systems. It was a map, a detailed star chart of their empire, every sector, every fleet movement, every recorded fleet strength, all laid out in a way they had never seen before. Someone had been tracking their every move. Someone had been calculating their weaknesses. It was all there, laid out for them to see, like a hunter stalking its prey. The room was thick with tension as the senior officers studied the chart, each one knowing what it meant. They were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted. The humans had been studying them just as much as they had been studying the humans, and what they had discovered in their observations was not just their military might, but the very nature of their empire. They had learned the structure, the weaknesses, the divisions in their command system, and worst of all, the humans had learned the most important detail of all: the Vorelians were not invincible. Commander Thalik stared at the map, frozen by the sheer weight of it. He had seen their ships, their fleets, their strength, but never had he seen the true extent of their knowledge of his people. The humans had been watching for far longer than any of them had imagined, and now they had everything they needed to tear apart their empire piece by piece. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. They were not fighting just to protect their borders. They were fighting to protect the very foundation of everything they had built. The voice spoke again, this time through every channel across the fleet, a voice calm, steady, and unyielding. It echoed across every ship, every command station, across every officer, every soldier, and every pilot. We know your fleet, we know your ships, we know your tactics, we know your weaknesses, and we are waiting. The words were simple, but the weight of them was crushing. The humans had already won without firing a single shot. They had infiltrated every system, every part of their empire, and now all that was left was the final confrontation, the moment when the Vorelian fleet would have to face the truth. They were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. They had become the prey. Thalik clenched his fists and turned to the council. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with the horror of what they had learned. But the message was clear and undeniable. The humans were not coming to negotiate. They were not coming to fight. They were coming to replace them. As the council session ended and the officers dispersed, there was an unspoken understanding among them. They could not retreat, they could not run, they could not ignore what had been revealed to them. They would have to face the humans on their terms, and that meant every tactic, every weapon, every strategy they had would be useless against an enemy that knew them better than they knew themselves. The Vorelian fleet was not just facing an invasion, they were facing an awakening, a reality where their strength was irrelevant, and their survival was in question. And as the ships moved through the void towards an uncertain future, they realized one thing above all else: they were not the ones in control anymore, the humans were. The fleet moved into position at the outer edges of the Vorelian home system. The ships were silent, no comms, no transmissions, just the cold hum of engines pushing them into a defensive perimeter, each ship's crew tense, but ready, knowing that their future depended on how well they handled this moment. They had been preparing for this day since the first anomaly had appeared, but nothing could have truly prepared them for what lay ahead. The Terran vanguard was no longer an unknown entity. It was a reality that stood before them like a wall, one they could not break through or escape from. Commander Thalek stood at the helm of the flagship, his mind racing with calculations, strategies, defenses, but they all seemed meaningless now. He had learned the hard truth that no weapon, no fleet, no tactics would matter in this final confrontation. The humans had already outplayed them. They had already won. Without a single shot fired, without a single strike, they had broken them, not with force, but with understanding, not with weapons, but with knowledge. The Vorelians were standing at the edge of the unknown, where they would either sink into the darkness or break through and survive. But survival meant accepting something they had refused to acknowledge for so long, that they were not the masters of the galaxy. They were just another species to be tested and judged. The voice came through the comm channels, again calm as ever and just as terrifying. The Terran vanguard had arrived, and they were waiting. The message was brief, simple: "We are here. Come and meet us or face extinction." The fleet commanders looked at each other in silence, the weight of the decision pressing on them. They could not retreat, they could not hide. They had already been seen. Every escape route had been closed off, every maneuver calculated, every weakness exposed. They had no choice but to face the humans head-on and hope that they could survive the encounter, but no one was sure what would happen next. Thalek issued the order, and the ships moved forward. They approached the center of the system, where the Terran ships were waiting, their silhouettes barely visible against the stars. But the moment they crossed into the system's gravity, well, everything changed. The stars themselves seemed to bend. The space between ships rippled as if reality itself had been manipulated. The Vorelian ships stopped dead in their tracks. All engines ceased, all systems froze for a moment of pure uncertainty before everything came back online, but not as it had been. Their sensors were disabled, the comms were locked into a loop of static, the ship's shields flickered and then dimmed, their weapons no longer responding to commands. The Terran vanguard had shown them the true meaning of control, and for the first time since the encounter began, the Vorelians understood just how powerless they were. Commander Thalek clenched his jaw, his fists tightening, as he ordered a full assault, but nothing happened. The ships continued to drift, frozen in place. And the voice spoke again, not through comms, not through their tech, but directly into their minds, a sharp, clear whisper that cut through the void. "We are here, we are watching you, and we have already won." The revelation was devastating. The Vorelian fleet had been rendered impotent before the humans even fired a shot. They were at the mercy of something they couldn't fight, something they couldn't understand. And in that moment, a deep dread settled over Thalek's heart. They were not here for conquest. They were not here to destroy them. They were here to show them their own insignificance. The ships continued to drift helplessly, and the humans did nothing they didn't need to. They simply waited, their victory already secured, as the Vorelian fleet struggled against the invisible force that held them in place. The realization hit harder than any weapon could. The humans had made their point. They didn't need to destroy the Vorelians. They didn't need to fight. They just needed to remind them that no matter how advanced they were, no matter how far they had come, they could always be brought to their knees by something beyond their understanding. For the first time in history, the Vorelians were not the dominant force in the galaxy. They were not the hunters, they were the hunted, and the Terran vanguard had shown them the true nature of power, not in strength or weapons, but in the ability to control everything and everyone around them. And with that knowledge came the final silence, the final surrender.